The Indian Navy has revived a proposal for building 2 nuclear-powered attack submarines, or SSNs. Now, what are SSNs and why does India need them? And can India be a blue water navy without SSNs? Joining me to discuss this tonight is one of India's most respected submariners, Vice Admiral Sushil. And in the studio, I have with me my colleague Deepak Bhadana. Admiral Sushil, welcome to the News9 Plus show.
Sandeep, good to be here.
Sir, I want to start by asking you this. SSNs, nuclear-powered attack submarines, they're a capability that India has wanted for a very long time. We've leased them in the past, first from the Soviet Union and later from the Russian Federation. Now we're given to understand that a third such boat, the Chakra 3, is stuck in a refit, an unending refit in the Russian Federation. One can say that, obviously because of the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, there are reports that suggest that India will build something like 2 SSNs, going up to a fleet of 6 SSNs. You're one of the most respected Indian submariners that we've ever had in the last couple of 60 years. Explain to us, sir, why are SSNs so required by the Indian Navy? Why does the Indian Navy need SSNs? And can we be a blue water force without nuclear-powered attack submarines?
You see, we worked in an old framework which very compactly divided the Navy's roles into, sea control and sea denial, and built a logic from there. But when the nuclear submarines came with unlimited endurance and speed, they very easily shifted from their, so-called sea denial role to being capable of sea control as well. But the carrier proponents, aircraft carrier proponents, would not like to see this as such. They always wanted this as a support to the fleet. So if a very capable frigate was part of the sea control mission, why wouldn't a submarine be? Why wouldn't a nuclear attack submarine be? Well, nuclear attack submarines have a distinct capability which is different from a surface ship. For example, you could send a SSN. The sea affords you enough opacity so that he can operate independently with sufficient firepower in frontline areas, in areas controlled by the enemy, which the surface navy would take time to reach to get a favorable situation done. To put it very simply, I think in King Arthur's court we had Sir Lancelot. He was one of the best knights, and without him, the knights of the Round Table were nothing. So the SSN is like Sir Lancelot.
The SSN is like Sir Lancelot. That's a very good analogy, Admiral Sushil. But I also remember that you telling me at some point that the SSN is possibly the only platform that you can project power with into contested waters, which means that waters that are guarded by the enemy, which are patrolled by the enemy. And here you have an SSN sneaking right under all of the enemy's defenses and its barriers and popping up and carrying out its sea defense, sea denial missions and sea control missions indeed. But, Admiral Sushil, before I move to my colleague Deepak Bhadana, who's bubbling with a lot of questions here, I want to ask you this: what has really delayed the SSN program for India? We have a strategic program, of course, for nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. That's on course from what we understand. Why has the SSN program, which is more of a tactical platform, which is meant to be with the naval fleet rather than the Strategic Forces Command, why has the SSN fleet, taken a backseat? This Project 77, it's been in the pipeline for many, many years now. We've been hearing about it for the last 2 decades also, but even now, it's been in the pipeline again for the last 6 or 7 years. Why has it been so delayed? Why has it been on the back burner? Is it just the carrier lobby that's to blame for it? Or is it the fact that it's a very, very resource-intensive platform? Could that be the answer?
Well, there is complex issues here. One, as you said, we had done a SSBN program and it's going on okay. The essential difference between the SSBN and the SSN is that in the capability of the reactor. An SSBN can afford to do slow speeds. It lies in wait for some order to come, but an
Yes.
SSN needs to move. So the reactor capability has to be far superior to what an SSBN has, because you're utilizing power at a very fast rate, unlike an SSBN. And to reach that reactor level, to reach the technology level of that sort of a reactor, I don't think we had the wherewithal for a very long time. I do not know the situation now,
Right.
but I suppose we will reach there, and therefore this project may, see the light of the day.
Absolutely, it may see the light of the day, but we don't know when. But from what you've just explained to us, Admiral Sushil, it appears that an SSBN or a ballistic missile submarine is like a bomber, and an SSN is like a fighter aircraft. I think what differs is the magnitude of the speed, and therefore the engine performance has to be that much better, and that explains the complexity of that. But Deepak, you have questions. You've been following our submarine building program very closely, including Project 75 India
and Project 75I.
Yes.
So one of my questions right now is that we know already that the Chinese Navy is making forays into the Indian Ocean.
Yes.
It's only a matter of time before we have a Chinese aircraft carrier which will be permanently stationed in this region. Do you think a force of 6 SSNs will be able to deny sea control to the Chinese?
I want to add to that question, Admiral Sushil, because in 2013 is when the Chinese first, conducted their long-range foray into the Indian Ocean. They sent a nuclear-powered attack submarine, on patrol in December 2013, if I remember correctly. But, to add to Deepak's question, the fact that the Chinese have been sending out regular submarine patrols ever since then, over the last 11 years. And the fact that they're talking of a permanent presence in the Indian Ocean. Would SSNs, a fleet of 6 SSNs that we are talking of now, my question is that when would these submarines be ready for combat? That's one question. And secondly, would a force of 6 SSNs be sufficient to meet our requirements in the Indian Ocean region?
Well, that's, 2 questions. One is the technology part of building the submarine. Really, I'm not in a position to answer what level we are at and what confidence we have in producing reactors that are required for SSNs. That's one part. We've been at it for a very long time, and I really do not know why we haven't progressed very much. So that is one part. The numbers is a difficult. We don't even have one, so 6 looks far better. That's one part of looking at it. As far as the Bay of Bengal area, the immediate maritime neighborhood of ours is concerned, we could say that 6 SSNs are fairly good. But an SSN operation is not necessarily to be in our own neighborhood. It is supposed to be in extended neighborhoods.
Right.
In extended neighborhoods, we need much more submarines. And especially if you want a counterpoise with many submarines operating in the areas which you think they should operate, then we need the numbers which are much more. And when you talk about a force level of 6, remember that the operational availability is only 66%. So we're talking about 4 submarines available at a time.
Right, that's an important point there, Deepak, and that's something that we miss out as armchair critics, and the practitioners will tell you that it is, as Admiral Sushil just mentioned, it's the availability of the platforms and not just the numbers. But Admiral Sushil, this fact that you mentioned that power projection would be a requirement, is that the reason that the US Navy has such a large number of SSN? They have over 50 nuclear-powered attack submarines in their inventory. Is that one of the reasons the US Navy has a global presence?
That's true. You see, the numbers of SSNs they have allows the fleet to go confidently to various areas.
Yes.
That's one important aspect. Whereas with 6 submarines, we'd hardly be able to provide any escort to the fleet. The power projection in American terms is totally different from what I mentioned.
Right.
The American presence is the ability to finally go and land and, exercise control from land. I mean, that's the sort of power projection they're talking about. But we are talking about the ability to push our threat right up to the enemy's maritime frontiers.
Right.
That would give them the reason to sit back and think.
Yeah, the reason, absolutely, the projecting power to your enemy's doorstep, and I think the only platform that can do that most effectively is the SSN. And that, Deepak, incidentally, is the reason why AUKUS, Australia, UK and US, came up with a proposal for SSNs, for Australia to own, build and operate its own SSNs rather than aircraft carriers. But given our threat perception, Admiral Sushil, the fact that we have a carrier-based navy, a navy that's centered around aircraft carriers. We've had that for a number of years, from the 1960s, more than 6 decades now. Where do SSNs really fit in? Is it an either-or situation, or do you see all of them operating together? SSNs being, say, the one arm of a carrier strike group.
No, SSNs. You see, in the United States configuration, the SSN forms part of any major frontline strike groups, because they afford two things. One is an advanced anti-submarine action, and also the requisite firepower to counter anything which is coming in from either from submarines or from surface ships. That's one important aspect of theirs. But and they have various areas of interest in which they operate. There are 7 fleets and so on and so forth. Whereas we have to look at theaters where we want to operate, and therefore our numbers in such missions are limited. So the question now is, when the American Navy started building and had a force-level planning, which is extrapolated to today, things were different. For example, today we are talking about maritime domain, transparency, which is absolutely transparent.
Yes.
And the only place which has certain opacity, which affords certain, information deniability, is the underwater.
Right.
And therefore, the submarine has an additional mission. That means the submarine becomes the platform to go and prepare the arena for the carrier to come. I mean, that's an additional role which the submarine will have to take on as it progresses, because unless you neutralize a certain amount of surface forces and the other capabilities which the enemy may have.
Yes.
And it's an interesting point to see why the 4 Ohio class submarines were made into SSGNs.
Yes. Maybe there's a lesson for us there, Admiral Sushil, at some point. Those SSGNs that were converted from SSNs, but we are still debating ones here, Deepak. 1 SSN every decade or 2 decades is what we are only able to deploy. But my final question to Admiral Sushil before we go is that, can the Indian Navy be a true blue water navy without nuclear-powered attack submarines? I'm aware of the fact that the Brazilian Navy, for instance, believe it or not, the Brazilian Navy possibly might have a nuclear-powered attack submarine before the Indian Navy.
It is a definitional problem. A blue water navy, earlier defined itself, that is the ability to operate beyond the brown waters, to sustain with fleet support ships and so on and so forth. That's not the only thing. The blue water navy is to be able to sustain operations wherever it wants. And to sustain operations wherever it wants in the current scenario. The Battle of Midway was fought when there was no surveillance. And it was a lucky chance that, the Americans found the Japanese carrier group. That doesn't happen anymore. They know exactly where you are. The Americans are so worried about the ballistic missiles which are going to be fired at them, and so on and so forth. So when you talk about blue water capability, the ability to sustain there matters. And the only platforms currently which can sustain in those sort of situations are SSNs. And therefore, my one-word answer would be no.
a very dark prognosis for us, Admiral Sushil, given the fact that, you know, you just told us how complex SSNs are and the kind of technological breakthroughs that it would take for us to field it. But still, it's still a breakthrough if we could even get government approvals, Deepak.
It's a beginning.
A beginning. Where it would end, we don't know, but given our track record, possibly 10 years or 15 years, Admiral Sushil possibly not wane on that for various reasons. But thank you very much for joining us, Admiral Sushil, and, you know, enlightening us on this very rarely discussed aspect of our nuclear sharks, the SSNs that India literally hopes and prays it gets at some point in the not so distant future. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for your time.